Making your first ever smartphone film can feel completely overwhelming. How do you write and create a story that's going to engage your audience from start to finish? What filmmaking accessories do you truly need that will save you money and time? And how do you know when to make that all-important cut when you're in the editing process? Let me answer those questions for you and so much more as I take you on a deep dive into creating your first ever smartphone shot short film. Let's get into it. I would always suggest making your film length of your first film between 3 and 5 minutes. Less than 3 minutes and you're not really giving yourself too much time to tell a decent journey for a character and a story. Over 5 minutes and you're going to start doubling the worries of locations, weather, storyboarding. You're going to be running out of time if it's your first film as well, and you won't have the experience really to tell that kind of length of story in a really nice and succinct way. In other words, you're going to end up with more of a narrative mess than a narrative success. So keep that film between 3 and 5 minutes long. One of the great things about creating a film that's 3 to 5 minutes in length is you really can't make it overly complicated. Really understand that as much as you want to make the next Lord of the Rings on your phone perhaps, you really need to make sure that simplicity is your best friend here. Now, one of the best roadmaps for you getting your story ideas onto paper, etc., is to look at what's realistic and practical to making your film. Do you live in a flat? Do you have a forest nearby? Do you have a park nearby? Do you work in a shop or have friends that own or work in shops where they'll allow you to film for free? All of these kind of things will allow you to guide yourselves towards the kind of story that you can realistically tell. For example, with my short film Plant Lady, my wife is an actor. I'm very fortunate in that sense, but even if it wasn't, I could perhaps do it myself or ask someone else to do it because the shots were all still shots pretty much. And being in my flat, it saved so much time. We didn't have to worry about the weather, sounds from outside affecting us in the filmmaking and pausing to let planes go by, that kind of thing. It really made the whole experience so much quicker than it would have been had I chosen loads of different locations. So one of my main sort of tips would be for making your own first short film would be to make your film a one location story. You don't have to, but it's going to make it easier. Now you could just write your story on a piece of paper, but that could get lost and damaged and you will not have it in the right format most likely. So I highly recommend that you Google film scripts and then look at the formats of how they're written. Once you've found those scripts and you understand how to write down like the character names, the dialogue, the annotations, the actions, that kind of thing, the scene numbers and page numbers, all that, you may want to use, if you're just going for free and have low budget like I did when I started out, Microsoft Word. It's very cheap or free and you can just copy the formats from the scripts that you've read onto Microsoft Word. It won't be exact, it may not even have the correct font for the writing, but it'll be a lot better than just writing on paper and getting lost and writing something that looks really amateur and could get damaged as well. For me now, I use Final Draft, which is fairly expensive, but they do have a range of plans for you to pay and you can cancel after a month as well, just like with Celtex, if you want to write your script and then get out of Dodge. So you've learnt your script now to format it, but there's one thing you want to keep in mind, and that is story structure. For a 3 to 5 minute film, I would look at the very basic 3-act story structure. So in Act 1, you're introducing the character and the environment and their life, so people can quickly get to know this character, a little bit about them. In a short film, you're not going to tell their whole life story, but that's absolutely fine because your story will be simple, remember? So in a 5-minute film, let's say the first minute, maybe 2 minutes, is your first act out of 3 in your story. In Act 1, you are introducing the character to your audience. Who are they? What are they like? Personality traits, that kind of thing, and introducing their life and the world that they live in. In Act 2, it will be all about your character overcoming the challenge in their life. For example, in my short film Caterpillar, it's about a guy who hates his 9-to-5 job, and in that middle act, Act 2, it's about him making a phone call and seeing if he can actually tell his boss that he quits and he's going to leave this job that is destroying his life and his mental health. Chapter 3 then is the resolution of your story, and it doesn't have to be a happy one. This film, it did have him leaving the job and ending up eating an ice cream, so he's extremely happy thinking about what could be lying ahead for him in a good life, but it easily could have been sad. He could easily have not quit and gone back to that job, as many people do when they have the thoughts of leaving a mundane, boring job. There's also a fourth element to writing your film's story, and that is the point of no return. So about 20 to 25% into your story in a 5-minute film, that would probably be within a minute, but it can also happen before the film even starts. It's a point of no return for your character. So for example, in Jurassic Park, it's when the dinosaurs escape. They can't go back from that and they have to deal with that challenge. Find what that point of no return is for your character, which compels them to move through the story because they cannot go back to the life they once had. Shot lists are super important as this is the moment where you're going to confirm what shots are going to go with which sections of your scenes, and if there's any, what camera movement you're going to have as well. So I would use an app like SHOTLIST, so you can use that where it's a free trial, or you can pay for a monthly subscription and then cancel it when you finish using it if you want to, or you can pay for a year subscription if that's more of what you want to lean into. You could, if you want to be really cheap and save money like I did on my first films, is just simply write your shot list on paper. The downside to that is if you're filming outside and it's rainy and bad conditions, that bit of paper could easily get ruined, and if it does get ruined, you could then end up ruining your whole filming and shoot day. So I'd highly recommend using a digitalized version of your shot list, whether it's using SHOTLIST, the app, or simply writing down on notes on a phone and sending it to someone else or to an iPad or something like that. That way you're gonna have the shot list ready to go, save yourself time and a lot of stress rather than trying to make up shots on the spot. Storyboarding is essentially the process of creating a visual shot list for your filmmaking. Now you can do this on paper, so you could draw out a load of frames and then draw how you want the shots to look within those frames, annotating with different color arrows so that you know what the camera movement might be in that shot on the day, and the actual movement of the characters on the day as well, if they walk out of frame, for example, and you follow them with the character. As I've mentioned before, the problem with using paper is that it could get scrunched up and damaged on the day, which is no good for you. So there are a couple of apps that I use on my iOS device. The first is Storyboard Animator. Now this is a relatively simple app that you can use as a free trial or pay just £4, less than the price of a coffee or a beer, and start creating your storyboards nice and easily. You can use your finger or a digital pen to start drawing out in the frames that they provide you, the different shots and how you want them to look, use different colors, different layers to annotate them again for camera movement and character movement, write little descriptions of how you want the shots to look, and then you can even play them out in real time by adding how long each scene is, so you can get an idea of the pacing as well when you play it back. You can then export the storyboards and use that on the day of your filmmaking. Now, if you have more of a budget for your first short film on a smartphone, then I would highly recommend looking into Previs Pro. It is absolutely phenomenal. It is very advanced, so as a result, it is quite expensive. You can use it as, I think it's $39.99 a month in dollars, or it's $99.99 a year. $299.99 for a lifetime pass. It's extremely advanced, where you can use pictures that you'd have taken from your location scouting and then put that into the background of your storyboard. You can then create sim-like characters, and you can even impose faces from pictures of the actual actors that you're using, and then plant that on them. You can also use something called augmented reality, which blew my mind when I used it in my tutorial for this app. It's where you actually superimpose essentially the scene that you've created physically onto a field that maybe you're standing on, so you can actually walk physically yourself through the scene and use your phone to look around at the characters and for different angles and shots. And then of course you can export the storyboard that you've created as well. So storyboarding is a really, really crucial part to making sure that you get your shots correct on the day, and it will save you time. You can also look at books for cinematography ideas like Christopher Kenworthy's Master Shots. Each volume I found really, really helpful. There are other books on cinematography too that'll give you a lot of ideas of how to block characters in scenes and frame and use composition for scenes. Now, audio is going to be a massive part of your film, 50% of your film quality in fact. People can forgive a slightly sketchy image on a short film, but they won't be able to forgive sketchy audio. So to get good quality audio, you are going to have to invest in some kind of audio equipment unless you want to make a silent film and get audio from YouTube Library, for example, or freesound.org and add that over your film. Lavalier microphones come at a range of prices, so you can pay anything from £10–15 for a cheap lavalier, which can get you decent sound, although not amazing, all the way up to a Rode lavalier microphone similar to what I'm using here, which is the Rode Wireless Go 2. I use the Rode Wireless Go 1 for my short film anxiety training, just placing it on the characters one at a time with different shots until I got all the audio coverage I needed. It was a pain not using the 2 version like I have here, where I've got 2 microphones but it got the job done. So the price range for lavaliers can range from anything from 10 to 15 all the way up to about £200, £300, depending on what kind of setup you want. The second option for microphones and getting good sound would be a shotgun microphone. So this is one that you plug into your phone, it stays directly by your phone, or if you have a long cable, you can boom in with a pole that microphone closer to your actor or where the sound's coming from. Now these also range quite massively in prices. You can get ones from £40, £50 all the way up to thousands of pounds. So make sure that you get good audio and check your takes when you're filming back again and again to make sure that audio is clean so you don't have to try and fake an audio afterwards. If you're filming in any kind of ProRes, like I am with my 15 Pro, filming in ProRes LT so I can use it with Apple Log, getting the most color range possible, you're going to be using a lot of storage on your phone. So you really need to get yourself an external storage if that's the case. For me, I use a Samsung T7 external SSD. That way I can either plug it straight into the phone and offload my files straight to that SSD as I'm recording my shots, or I can just offload a load of shots onto that SSD one lot at a time as I go through my filmmaking day. If you have a lightning port, for example, on an older iPhone, you can use something like a SanDisk flash drive, which you can plug straight into your phone and then offload files onto that. Now, the number one accessory that you will need to buy for your smartphone filmmaking and your first short film is an ND filter, a neutral density filter. Now, as every YouTuber will tell you, these essentially cut out the amount of light that's hitting the sensor inside of your lens. This way you're able to keep your highlights under control, you're allowed to bring your shutter speed right down, which matches with your frames per second, and as a result, you'll get really nice film-like motion blur, as opposed to really stuttery, jittery motion blur that you don't want and is a giveaway of an amateur film. So make sure an ND filter or ND filters are your go-to for when you first make your short film. Now, location scouting is an area that I made some huge mistakes in when making my last short film, Anxiety Train. One of the scenes was between two main characters in an alleyway, and when I went there for the first couple of times, it was really quiet. These gates that were either end of the alley were completely open, and it felt like a place I could easily film in. Had I actually asked people in the area what it's like and if there are any permits needed for filming there, I would have found out something really important. Whilst we were filming, a guy came up to us and started complaining that he had to close the gates because it was actually a shopping area, which I thought would be open for the whole night, but it wasn't. He then closed the gates, allowing us to get out when we needed, but because the gates were closed, I then had to change the angle in which I was shooting the person opposite the lead character. That way you never saw the exit that she walks out of, you just see her walking away slightly, and I had to cut early back to the main character in editing. Had I done more research in my location scouting, this wouldn't have been a problem. When you're location scouting, sound is really important as well. So in this location, I didn't notice at the time because I was just so excited to be filming, but there's an air vent somewhere, I couldn't even find it on the day. But when we were filming, there's an air vent that was making a really annoying sound in the background of the shots, which if you listen carefully, you can hear here. Again, a proper thorough location scouting of that location would have meant I'd either change the location entirely or somehow made it part of the story. Also think when you're location scouting, does the location you're choosing help tell your story? If it doesn't, then don't use it. These are the 5 settings that you need to look into and make sure that you've locked down before you hit that record button. First setting is your ISO level. Now, ISO is essentially the brightness of your image. So you want that number to be as low as possible, which will also give you a nice clean image and stop you from having rough, what I call dancing bugs in the corners of shots, in shadows and that kind of area of your shots. If you have an iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max using Apple Log, you can actually crank that ISO right the way up to 1250 and still get a clean shot, but only if you're using Apple Log. If you're not using Apple Log or a good version of Log on your phone, then do keep that ISO number as low as possible. Now, if you're creating a narrative short film, you want to be using either 24 or 25 frames per second, depending on where you are in the world and the energy frequency of the lighting that you're near. For example, where I am in the UK, we use PAL energy frequency, so I have to shoot in 25 frames per second. Otherwise, with certain types of lighting, I can get a rippling effect down the screen, which you do not want for your shots, and you'll notice that straight away. In the States, you would use 24 frames per second. You then want to take the number you're using, 24 or 25 frames per second, and doubling that number into your shutter speed. So if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, your shutter speed needs to be 1/48. If you're shooting in 25 frames per second, you want your shutter speed to be 1/50. That way you're going to get really nice smooth cinematic motion blur, and again if you're shooting outdoors you'll need those ND filters to achieve this. White balance is really crucial. If you use just your native phone app for filmmaking, a lot of them don't have the white balance tool, so it's really important you use a third-party app. If you have this unlocked and it's on auto, then when you move your camera or someone walks past the camera, that white balance, i.e. how the colors look to you, is going to shift and change. You don't want that. So you can either use the presets that you have on the professional third-party filmmaking apps. That will give you the correct white balance and correct colors on your screen as to how you see it with your eyes, or you can move it individually on a dial and find the right color balance there. Lock it and then record. In terms of apps, Cinema P3 Pro camera is great for £10. Blackmagic camera is free, which I have tutorials on. You've got Moment Pro camera app, Beastcam app, and on Android, MC Pro 24 FPS. How smooth your shoot days go on the actual day will depend on two things. One, how well you've executed your pre-production via the tips I've given you in this video previously to now, and your ability to make productive and creative decisions on the spot as you get challenged by things that surprise you on the day of filming. For example, I shot a short film for someone recently where the actual living room was joined onto the kitchen, so a wall was essentially missing. Whilst it was great for me to have more space to move my camera and tripod into, it actually meant that it was really limiting on camera angles. Because of the location scouting I did and went there previously, I was able to understand what angles were available to me, but even on the day, there were still things and movements of the props and the sets that meant I had to adjust camera angles still. So there's things that will challenge you on the day. Just stay calm and know that you can do anything if you put your mind to it, and make the decision that you think makes the most sense for the storytelling of your film. My 5 biggest tips, of course, for a smooth shoot day, therefore, are preparation, 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 and you've guessed it, there are going to be 3 different versions of your script and story as you move through the process. So the first version you have will be the written story that you have scripted. The second version of your story will be the film that you actually shoot on the day, and the third version will be the one you have once it's edited. Editing is where huge decisions are made and your film can be made or broken. So the way I usually edit is on instincts and emotion rather than any kind of technical reasoning. That way you're going to have a good feel for how the story's flowing and you're not going to be thinking mathematically. If this is your first film that you're editing, then I highly recommend using iMovie. Something like that would be really, really useful. It's a great way to learn the basics of editing as well, and it of course is free. If you want a more advanced editing app, for example, which is also available for Android devices, then LumaFusion is a brilliant option to use. It's a lot more advanced, but with a reasonable price of $29.99 or £25, it's an absolute bargain. No subscriptions or anything like that at all. Also with this app, you can start learning how to color correct and color grade as well as adding in transitions and layering in shots over each other. Oh, and it's pretty good for using audio as well. If you want to get into a really advanced software straight away and really challenge yourself, you could use DaVinci Resolve. I use the free version now for my editing, and with the amount of quality that you get with that and features, it's really, really worth downloading and using and getting to learn. It does have a steep learning curve, but with the color grading and color grading effects that you can use as well, and where you can tweak your image, it is just absolutely brilliant. But again, that is if you're much more advanced in editing. Perhaps you're good at editing, but this is your first film, that would be a good way to go. And remember, the genre and feel and narrative of your story is going to guide your editing too. For example, if you do have something that's more mundane, a drama, maybe it's like a slower paced story, then slower editing is going to be your key, and lingering on shots for longer than maybe you would feel is comfortable. For a comedy, you may want to have quick cuts to emphasize funny moments. Well done, you've made your first short film. Now what? Well, you can upload your films to YouTube for people to watch, comment on, and hopefully learn from. Or if you have a bit of budget left over, if you have any at all, you can start thinking about entering into film festivals. Film Freeway is a website that hosts a lot of film festival connections, so that way you can sign up, create your own profile, upload your film to your profile, and then you can search in a search bar smartphone film festivals, mobile film festivals, short film festivals. And then you can start looking at your budget and how much they cost, so you can start making a good idea about what festivals to go for. If you want to check out my first ever short film, right here, right now called Blue, then I highly recommend you have a look at that. It's pretty rough around the edges and that was without preparation. If you want to check out Anxiety Train, my latest short film, that is with preparation and you'll see a huge difference. If you've got any questions, hit me up in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. See you on the next one. Take care. Happy filmmaking. Bye bye.